I called you to be an overcomer. You are an overcomer. And so ever since then, that has been my life theme, my life journey is overcoming. Because no matter how hard it gets, and it gets hard, no matter how difficult it gets, that's my attitude. Mm-hmm. Because even in the painful times, the things that I've been through, and even going on one time, one of my daughters was very sick, and I had to go to Virginia, and she had pneumonia, and she just, dealing with some very hard physical problems. I had to remember that I'm an overcomer. I can overcome this, so that she can see that nothing comes our way that we can't overcome.
That's awesome. That's great.
Thank you.
So, what's next in your life? How's the business going?
The business is going good. It's slowed down a little because of the path that I'm taking. I am also a full-time student, online student. So
really?
Going for my bachelor's degree in behavioral science.
Really?
So I'm going to be a family and relationship counselor.
Wow.
So
you're in transition.
So I feel the transition, and sometimes in the transition, it's not always it's always comfortable.
Right.
And
you accept that.
Yes.
And you keep the positive attitude.
Yes.
Good girl.
So enough of me. So what's going on with you, Mark?
What's going on with me? Well, I moved to Florida almost 2 years ago, down here in the Space Coast. And just to kind of refocus, I guess, on doing my art full time. I've kind of had a jagged career, or careers, I should say, as far as finding my voice, basically, too, I grew up in an artistic family. My father's a full-time artist, and he's going to be 92 in a few weeks, and he still paints very conservative portraits back in Buffalo, New York. And my mother was in musical comedy, trying to make it big in New York, and they both, I think their artistic ways connected them. They knew each other as children and then kind of reconnected in adulthood. But my father never wanted us. He raised 5 kids, painting portraits and teaching, which I didn't realize as a child, but as I've gotten older, of course, that's pretty remarkable. But he wanted a more stable life for all his kids. And, I've overcome a lot of things in my life too. And I like to party as a young teenager and gave up drinking when I was 22. And, I followed a degree. I got a degree in hotel management, but the way I got that is the priest in my Catholic high school just said, "Well, Palmer, you're not that smart. You got a C average." He goes, "Do you like to travel?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, where I went to the seminary at Niagara University," he said, "they've got a program in travel tourism, and you don't have to be that smart to get in." He goes,
"Wow."
That's how I picked my career, okay? And my dad thought, okay, that's great, So one thing led to another, and it really served me well. I became involved in the sales end of things in the hotel business. I got my first job through an internship in Washington, D.C., and worked my way up to director of sales and marketing of hotels. I worked for Ritz-Carlton Hotels, and I was transferred out to Palm Springs, California in the late 80s. And that's when I started to paint. I didn't know anybody out there, and simply by mistake, in the move, I had some crepe paper, the streamers for birthday parties, and some of it got wet and it bled on some cardboard, and it made some really interesting colors and shapes. And I've always been attracted to color and form and all of that. Color for me is like emotion, and it speaks, and it brings you joy. It can, sorrow, whatever. So I started arranging these pieces of crepe paper on, I bought these little postcard, watercolor postcards in a spray bottle, and they made some interesting, abstract paintings, and I made Christmas cards out of them that year, holiday cards, and sent them, and my dad was like, "These are great," And I was always trying to get my dad's approval, so I Then I realized while I'm out there in California and I'm working during the day but nothing to do at night, I said, well, this is kind of like watercolors. And one of my dad's good friends was a watercolor painter. So I went out and bought myself some watercolors and then just started painting like little desert scenes out from where I lived in Palm Springs, California. Mm-hmm. And one thing led to another, and that's how my art career kind of took off. But I've done different things. I had my first show in a coffee house in Washington, D.C. I was transferred back there with Ritz-Carlton, and I sold 15 out of 20 paintings, and I was like, hey, I'm liking this, you know? And then one thing led to another, and I think my sales and marketing background really helped me catapult me into going out there and trying to find other shows and doing my artwork. So I was working a 9-to-5 job and doing my artwork and having shows for a number of years. At one point, late 99, I ended up selling one of my condos that I bought in D.C. It was a good time to sell. For the first time, I made a little money in my life. And I was probably, like artists do, sometimes have an emotional little breakdown. And I just didn't like my job anymore. And I ended up quitting because I had a little security blanket with the money. So I started doing it was like jumping off the diving board, and we all have to do that in life, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And do things we're afraid of. But what happened was a couple consulting jobs opened up, and I moved back into a studio condo. And all my friends, I was 38 at the time, said, what are you doing? You know, they're starting to maybe buy homes up at the beach and things, and I'm kind of going backwards, or it seemed that way at least. But, you know, you have to be true to yourself. And I just kind of pursued my career, and then I learned about a little town in Kentucky that was welcoming artists. They were giving away buildings. I got a pre-Civil War building for $1, 5,000 square feet. I sold my other 2 condos in D.C., moved to Kentucky, had the building renovated, and opened my own art gallery downstairs and living space upstairs. Prior to that, I had also run a gallery in D.C. for the 2 years prior. So that's kind of where my career took me. Then I went through some depression and ended up going back to Buffalo for 7 years, got a job with the credit union, put some money in the bank, and then I was done with that and ended up moving to Florida 2 years ago, and I'm pursuing my art and doing more outdoor art festivals. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
So what, you know what, I'm listening to you and you're talking about the things that you've been through, you know, and how you have to be true to yourself, and you have to, you know, you face some challenges and you didn't give up.
No, but there were days where I wanted to. And sometimes days turned into weeks and months. And, you know, sometimes life has a way of sidetracking us or slowing us down. But yeah, no, you're right. You don't give up. You just keep going.
Yeah. And it's important to know that, you have to overcome.
Yes.
And that's basically what you were doing.
Yes.
You was overcoming your situations, your obstacles and stuff. So how do you feel about what you're doing now? Do you feel like you've in your niche, or there's something you still got to be doing, or what?
Well, that's a good question. No, I feel very content here. You know, the ocean's 20 minutes away. I live in Rockledge. I get to the beach. I walk the beach. I get to do my artwork. I have a couple part-time jobs. I do what I need to do in order to do my art, in order to have my voice, you know, like you're talking about your voice, you know. We all have something to say. We communicate all in different ways. And but I also feel that my art throughout the years, too, has given back to the community. Just like your art here, being a commentator and an interviewer on, you know, the radio station, you're sharing your experience, and there's people listening, and we're all human, you know, and we all have dreams and all have aspirations. And I know a lot of times when I'm doing my art, and like recently started these outdoor art festivals, some people come up in my art, in some of the art I've been doing lately is very primitive, kind of childlike looking, and I hear some parents say to their kids, you could do better than that. And that's at first glance. And a lot of people look at my art and they smile and they say to me, I really like that. It's at first glance, it might be childlike, and that's what I'm trying to go back to with especially this current body of mixed media work that I'm doing, is go back to like when I used to sit in the classroom as a first and second grader, and just, you remember how they had the different colors up above the blackboard and the alphabet and everything, and I could just, and in the winters in Buffalo, look outside and just watch the snow fall and daydream. And, they say we should all take about 20 minutes to just sit and think and do nothing, almost like a meditation every day. And that's kind of, I get taken away through color and shapes and form and doing my art. But I like when my art touches some other person, that it touches something inside of them, whether it's a memory or goes to their soul and brings something out in them. They might be struggling. They might be going through things. People have purchased my art and they've said, one woman last year at a show that I did, she goes, she came back a few times that day and she goes, I need to have this painting. And she said, it just makes me smile. It makes me happy. And to me, there's no greater gift to know that something that I created, makes somebody happy. But also, I want to take it back to what we were talking about earlier with your attitude. Your attitude is something you created. Yeah. And your attitude can change that person. I have a part-time job right now working the toll booths here. And some days are better than others, Opal. Yeah. I've been screamed at and some obscenities and so on. And you realize that people are coming through. They might be late. They might be in a hurry. You're going to get the best and the worst coming through those toll booths. And I've learned so much about human nature. And then I take what I've absorbed in the toll booth for 6 or 8 hours that day, and I go home and start creating it in my artwork, whether it's the pain and angst and frustration of some driver coming through that might have had a fight with their spouse or might have had a bad day at work, might have lost their job. And if they lash out at me, I try not to lash back. You try to give them something positive to leave with. I think that's the key to a successful life. No matter what our goals are, it's more about the process of getting there and our attitude in reaching the goal. Once we reach the goal, it's kind of like, okay, now I got to set another goal. Right. But it's that process and that attitude we choose to adopt as we move forward in reaching those goals that I think is so important. When I had my art gallery in Kentucky, one of my greatest joys was when I would have the little kids come over and do art projects and just watch their kind of unencumbered, they have no boundaries. They say what's on their mind, they make you smile because of that. Whereas as we grow older, we're told, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't say this, you can't say that. And, so working with the kids, or I was in this small town in Kentucky with the gallery, and many people were never even exposed to art, and they walked in and they felt very intimidated by the gallery. And I would, when they said, some people would just come in and say, I ain't ever been in an art gallery before. And I'd say, that's okay. I'm really glad you came in today. And I said, listen, do me a favor. Because I represented anywhere between 30 to 40 artists at any given time, including my own work. And I said, do me a favor. I said, go through the gallery, and before you leave, tell me what your favorite piece was. And that kind of put them at ease. And, art can be very intimidating. So it put them at ease. They enjoyed the experience. They absorbed something. And when they came back, they would tell me, this was my favorite piece. And then, of course, I'd say, well, why? Why was it your favorite piece? Well, because I like the texture, or I like the color, or I like the subject matter, or they just put it to me in their own words. And, you know,